I'd ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, we didn't expect to be in session this week, but we are. And of course, as we all know, the theme for this entire year has been COVID-19 writ large. More than 330,000 Americans have died from the novel coronavirus. Tens of millions have lost their jobs, and every community across the country has felt the devastating blow dealt by this pandemic. But as we know, the threats that existed long before this virus still are with us. Even though most of the world hit pause to battle COVID-19, our adversaries did not. And our brave service members didn't pack their bags and not show up for work when everybody else shut down. Over the last several months, as the Senate has worked to support our country through this pandemic, we've kept an eagle eye on the other threats on the horizon. And we passed the National Defense Authorization Act to ensure that we are prepared for whatever comes at us. For our forces to continue fighting and defeating our adversaries in every corner of the world, they need funding, they need stability, they need to be able to plan, and they need the unwavering support of the United States Congress and all 330 million Americans. The 2021 NDAA provides that support from Congress. It will prepare our military and service members to address the threats that exist today while preparing for those that we will inevitably face tomorrow. Earlier this month, this legislation passed the House by a vote of 335 to 78, and the Senate by a vote of 84 to 13. Those are rare vote margins in Congress these days, and that alone is a testament to the importance of this legislation and its bipartisan support. We know the President has the constitutional authority to veto any bill for virtually any reason, and he has exercised that power with this legislation. The reasons the President has given, I don't think are frivolous at all. They just shouldn't be tagged to this particular piece of legislation. His concerns about Section 230 and under the Communications Decency Act and the power of these social media platforms to censor speech is troubling indeed. This is something we really haven't confronted before. We know that under the First Amendment, the government can't censor speech, but with small town newspapers and media outlets and other alternatives fading to away, more and more the American people rely on Facebook and Google and other internet platforms to get their information. And they have, I believe, become de facto public forum. So I agree that we do need to address Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, as the President has pointed out. The President also has a point about the commission to rename military bases that's part of the Defense Authorization Act. Unfortunately, the amendment that was adopted in the Armed Services Committee undermines the role of Congress once the commission makes its report to do as Congress believes should be done. But the truth is, as we've learned from our friends across the pond in the UK, no parliament can bind a future parliament, and indeed no Congress can bind a future Congress. That's true. So if these are things that the President believes we should address, and that members of the Congress and the new administration believe we should address, we will address them. And we have an opportunity to do that. But we should not try to do that on this bill and risk the loss of this important piece of legislation now in its 60th year of adoption. The Defense Department is hands down the largest employer in the United States, with nearly 2.9 million employees, including both service members and civilians. These men and women can be found in more than 160 countries around the world and on all 7 continents. Supporting them is a Herculean task, and the NDAA is a significant way in which we do that. The Defense Authorization Bill also includes a 3% pay raise for our troops and additional support for their families. such as career support for military spouses and quality child care on military bases. Given the fact we have an all-volunteer military, it's important we not only support our service members who wear the uniform, but the families that support them as well. I've heard it said you can recruit a member of the United States military, but if you want to retain them, you've got to take care of their family, and I believe that's absolutely true. This bill also ensures previous reforms to improve the quality of military housing and health care are implemented appropriately. Those who serve in our military have made tremendous sacrifices in order to safeguard our freedoms and our way of life. I regard our support for them and for our national defense the number one priority of the federal government. Everything else pales in significance. So we should do everything in our power to ensure that they and their families are appropriately taken care of. Beyond pay and benefits, that means giving them, the military members, the training, the facilities, the equipment they need not only to succeed on the job, but to return home safely. The NDAA authorizes military construction projects across the country, including $183 million in Texas, which will bring serious updates and improvements to our military bases. At Joint Base San Antonio, this funding will provide for a range of new facilities, including a barracks, a flight simulation system, and an F-16 mission training center. At Joint Reserve Base Fort Worth, it will support an F-35 operations and maintenance facility, vehicle maintenance shop, and an aircraft maintenance hangar. It will also support fuel facilities at Fort Hood and provide additional funding for the Pantex plant in Amarillo, which maintains a large portion of our nuclear stockpile. Maintained and modernized facilities are a critical component to military readiness, and this legislation makes tremendous investments in our facilities around the world. It will authorize 93 new F-35 Joint Strike Fighters that will be built by Texans in Fort Worth. As we work to counter increasingly sophisticated adversaries around the world, this investment in our military readiness could not be more important. In addition to supporting our members in uniform and ensuring they're ready for action when called upon, the NDAA helps our military take stock of the evolving threat landscape and ensure that our country is taking active steps to counter threats on the horizon. In recent years, China and Russia have risen to the top of the threats to our world, to our country, and to world order, with China now assuming the #1 role. We remember the Cold War after World War II, where we've sought to contain and counter Soviet expansionism, and actually the mutual deterrence that we have established during that time has worked. But China is a unique challenge, and none of the old rules apply to China. They're increasingly belligerent and well-resourced and continue to demonstrate a lack of respect not only for the U.S. and our closest allies, but for basic human rights. The Chinese government continues its disturbing and unacceptable genocide against the Uyghur people. The so-called political re-education camps are nothing more than concentration camps where Uyghurs are tortured. Recent reporting has found that the treatment in these camps often includes forced abortions, birth control, and sterilization. And China continues to chip away at the freedoms and autonomy of Hong Kong, notwithstanding its promises to the contrary, using a so-called national security law to extinguish opposition to the Chinese Communist Party and to deny the people of Hong Kong the freedoms that they were promised. As I mentioned, though China doesn't stand alone as a threat to the world, Russia is becoming increasingly aggressive around the world in its efforts to wreak chaos and sow discord. Since their attempts to interfere with the 2016 election, we've witnessed aggression after aggression from Russia, not just here in the cyberspace, but around the world. From Russian-backed mercenaries fighting in the Middle East, to its attempt to steal the coronavirus vaccine research, and in the last few weeks, a massive cyber attack on U.S. government agencies. Russia continues to undermine the U.S. and our allies and shows no signs of stopping. It's become increasingly clear, if it wasn't already, that China and Russia adhere to no rules and no principles but their own. As the National Defense Strategy outlined, the threats posed by these two countries are increasingly dangerous, and countering these growing threats requires a clear and concentrated effort from Congress. That's exactly why passing the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, is so important. This legislation prioritizes strategic competition with China and Russia and takes a strong approach to counter the threats posed by adversaries around the world. It will build on the progress we've made in recent years to strengthen our military after the draconian cuts during the Obama-Biden administration and achieve peace through strength. Over the last several decades, the NDAA has provided an annual opportunity for us to take stock of the evolving threat landscape and ensure that our national defense is prepared to meet the challenges, not only of today, but of tomorrow. And this year's Defense Authorization Act is no exception. It takes a strong approach to counter the threats posed by our adversaries around the world. It invests in modernized national defense that's critical to maintaining peace through strength, and it provides support for our service members and their families. And above all, it sends a message to the world that our country is and will remain the global military leader. I've supported this legislation on the Senate floor many times, and I'll do so once again when the opportunity to vote to override the veto presents itself. One of Congress's most critical responsibilities is to provide for the common defense, and the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, is how we will deliver. Madam President, I yield the floor, and I'd note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander.